Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs. And they worked long, they worked hard, and frankly, they worked very quickly on something that will be spoken about 100 years from now and 200 years from now. Extremely important. Essentially, you cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the leading candidate, whether it was the leading candidate or a candidate that was well down on the totem pole. You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly, but a court shouldn't be doing that, and the Supreme Court saw that very well. And I really do believe that will be a unifying factor, because while most states were thrilled to have me, there were some that didn't, and they didn't want that for political reasons. They didn't want that because of poll numbers, because the poll numbers are very good. We're beating President Biden in almost every poll. New York Times came out yesterday with a very big poll for us. So they didn't like that, and you can't do that. You can't do what they tried to do. And hopefully Colorado, as an example, will unify. I know there's tremendous support. They've brought our support up very strong in Colorado, because people in Colorado thought that was a terrible thing that they did. And while we're on the subject, and another thing that will be coming up very soon will be immunity for a president, and not immunity for me, but for any president. If a president doesn't have full immunity, you really don't have a president, because nobody that is serving in that office will have the courage to make, in many cases, what would be the right decision, or it could be the wrong decision. It could be, in some cases, the wrong decision, but they have to make decisions, and they have to make them free of all terror that can be rained upon them when they leave office, or even before they leave office. And some decisions are very tough. I can tell you that as a president, that some decisions to make are very tough. I took out ISIS, and I took out some very big people from the standpoint of a different part of the world. Two of the leading terrorists, probably the two leading terrorists ever that we've ever seen in this world. And those are big decisions. I don't want to be prosecuted for it. Another president wouldn't want to be prosecuted for it. It had a tremendously positive impact. It stopped everything cold. And sometimes you have to make those. They were tough decisions. Sometimes you have to make decisions like that. When you make a decision, you don't want to have your opposing party or opponent, or even somebody that just thinks you're wrong, bring a criminal suit against you, or any kind of a suit when you leave office. I have that right now at a level that nobody's ever seen before. I have rogue prosecutors, and I have rogue judges. I have judges that are out of control. And it's a very unfair thing for me, but serving perhaps as a sample to others of what should not be happening when you make good decisions. And in my case, the economy was great. We didn't go into any wars. We totally defeated ISIS. We provided the largest tax cuts in history. We provided the largest regulation cuts in history. But think of it, no wars. We beat ISIS 100% of the caliphate. And there were no wars. We did a job that was great, but maybe I wouldn't have done that. The caliphate, defeating them, was very powerful. It was going to take 4 years. It took me 4 months. But it was a very strong dictum that I gave. I said, get them, defeat them, end it. We were fighting for 20 years against ISIS, and we did it very quickly. I don't want to be prosecuted. In that case, it worked out very well. There will be some things that perhaps don't work out so well, but I don't want to be prosecuted because I decided to do something that is very much for the good of the country, and actually for the good of the world. A president shouldn't have that on his mind, and he has to have a free and clear mind when he makes very big decisions, or it's going to be nothing more than a ceremonial post. You'll be president, it'll be a wonderful thing, and you won't do anything because you don't want to be hit by your opponent or hit by somebody else, because who wants to leave office and go through what I've gone through? I'm being prosecuted by Biden, my opponent, because every one of these things, whether it's Fannie Willis or Bragg, these are local and state, but they're in total coordination with the White House. You can't do that. It shouldn't be done. I mean, a thing like that. In the case of the DA's office, they put one of the top people, maybe the second person, in the Manhattan DA's office to get Trump. They had a Hillary Clinton lawyer leave the law firm, very prestigious big law firm, leave the law firm to go into the DA's office to get Trump, Pomerantz, Mr. Pomerantz. So he goes in to become a prosecutor, worked for the Democrat Party and Hillary Clinton, goes in to prosecute Donald Trump at a local level, in total coordination with the Department of Justice, meaning Biden. And then you have the Fannie Willis, or as she would say, Fani, F-A-N-I, but Fani. And she hired somebody, knew the person long before this horrible prosecution took place. And she went out and she paid him an unbelievable amount of money, more money than he ever had dreamt possible, much more money than other people that do that for a living. He never did it at all, had no experience in it at all. And they had obviously a conflict. We don't have to go into that, but they were able to get a lot of money because it was a high-profile person. Me, I'm a very high-profile person. So they were able to pay him close to $1 million when he was not equipped to do the job, and she's not equipped to do the job, and that case should end immediately. That case is so conflicted, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And then you have deranged Jack Smith, who's a Trump hater and represents all the Trump haters, and he's going wild. He's just a wild man. He's been overturned unanimously by the Supreme Court. Went after other people over the years. He's had great failure. But he's mean, he's nasty, he's unfair. And the judges on these cases, they're all Trump haters. Other than we have maybe one or two that I think can be fair. But you look at New York, what's happened. I mean, these people have tremendous hatred. You can't do this to a president. And again, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about in the future. A president has to be free. A president has to be, if the president does a good job, I did. Some people would say a great job. But if the president does a good job, a president should be free and clear and frankly celebrated for having done a good job. Not indicted 4 times,
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, first signed by Presidents Bush and Gorbachev in 1991, has been part of the nuclear weapons framework in some form ever since. Barack Obama and Dmitry Medvedev inaugurated its successor, New START, in 2010. Under its terms, Russia and the United States, owners of 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, would limit their deployed strategic warheads to 1,550 and their long-range missiles and bombers to 700. Each side could inspect the other's sites to ensure compliance up to 18 times a year. But inspections were halted, first by COVID-19 and then by deteriorating relations since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. On Tuesday in Moscow, Vladimir Putin announced Russia was suspending its membership, he said, in response to hostile US actions.
And now they want to inspect our defense objects. In the current condition of confrontation that takes place today, it sounds like nonsense.
US-Russia relations on nuclear weapons have been strained for years. The United States pulled out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2002 and left the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, accusing Russia of developing a cruise missile that breached its terms. Experts fear a breakdown of the architecture that for decades has reined in nuclear arsenals.
We seem to be losing the last bilateral relationship governing nuclear weapons. So we could have an arms race after this. And that arms race has not existed because of this agreement, because of the inspections that back up the intelligence that both states have. And so you have one of those pillars being taken away.
Joe Biden agreed a 5-year extension to New START when he took office in 2021. Vladimir Putin emphasized his action was a suspension, not a withdrawal, but has raised the prospect of the treaty lapsing in 2026. He also said he had put new nuclear systems on combat duty and pledged to resume nuclear testing if the United States did the same. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera.
Grand treaties are no more as Russia and China increase their saber rattling. Welcome to More War Mondays here in the Rob Maness Show live on Patriot.tv and our X Spaces simulcast audience. Well, the era of grand treaties from the Cold War is over. We need to get over it and start acting like it. Treaties only work when there's credible deterrence and a willingness to inflict a cost for a party failing to adhere to the treaty. In fact, the United States abandoned the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF Treaty, as you just heard, after we watched Russia cheat on it a gazillion times, folks, resulting in the reactivation of the Nuclear Tomahawk cruise missile program in this year's Defense Authorization Act. With this apparent Russia space nukes issue we've talked about, we should be prepared to exit the International Space Treaty of 1967. But will we, or should we? Do we have a credible deterrent to keep that treaty viable? Will our idealistic State Department personnel, what my guest today calls the blue team, even consider the idea of abandoning these grand treaties altogether? And with China continuing its long strategy of reuniting Taiwan with the mainland, will the communists keep their treaty obligations, or should we just expect that they will not? With the CCP's continuing aggressive military behavior toward Taiwan, confidence in treaties is these days shouldn't be very high. Well, my guest today has quite a bit to discuss with us about these issues and more. Colonel retired John Mills, U.S. Army, is a national security professional with service in 5 areas: the Cold War, the peace dividend, the war on terror, the world in chaos, and now great power showdown in the fight to save our republic. He's the former director of cybersecurity policy, strategy, and international affairs at the Department of Defense. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and has authored 2 books, including his latest, The War Against the Deep State. Colonel Mills, John, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Hey, Rob, always an honor to be on the show with you. Thank you.
Hey, it's good to see you. And I should add that you're also a host on Patriot.tv and Worldview Network with Brandon House. So welcome to that club, my friend. We're glad that we're partnering as colleagues in this endeavor, too. Well, before we dive into the Grand Treaty issue and China and those kind of things, John, we've got this breaking news. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled in a thumping 9-0 decision against the state of Colorado for trying to remove Donald J. Trump from the ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the insurrection section is what I like to call it. And the thumping extends to every other state. I just want to get your take on it. I mean, we're both retired colonels. We've commanded U.S. Armed Forces. We have a vested interest and a stake in the outcome of anything that's going to help right the ship of the Republic of the United States.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Absolutely. Hooray for the Union. I mean, this just makes absolutely no sense. It would be destabilizing and destructive to the foundations of our constitutional republic to just allow states to and it was very I mean, it was 9-0. Packing the Supreme Court doesn't even matter in this case. Could have been 12, but it would have been 12-0. And so this is just crazy and an absolute rejection of these contrived lawfare suits by states, Colorado, but you've also had, I think it was Maine, most recently Illinois. Somebody who was a traffic court judge decided she was suddenly a constitutional lawyer and threw Trump off the ballot in Illinois. Believe me, this ain't over. They're going to try. Some of these states are just going to ignore the Supreme Court, just like they ignore the Supreme Court on the Second Amendment issues. And they're going to try, but there's a conveyor belt of other ideas. A great victory, absolutely great victory, thrashing. But they're going to try other things, and we still got the next real big hurdle is the is a president exempt from being prosecuted for the conduct of their duties, which is, listen, if they allow that, I mean, this is absolute third world kangaroo court, which it already is, but the blue team is relentless. So great victory on this one, more to come.
Yeah, it is, and I think even when all of the lawfare, both the criminal and the lawsuits, gets appropriately trashed as we go into the election, that is what I believe is going to happen. The left is already talking about, and Politico's printed an article, and I think somebody else has too, as of yesterday, that the Congress, if the Democrats win it, they're gonna not certify the election if Donald Trump wins. And last I checked, that they themselves said that's an insurrection, John, based on what happened on January 6th, 2021, and all of the aftermath after that. So we'll see. But you're right. They're never going to stop fighting. We've got to continue to strengthen our institutions and clean our rotten ones out and move forward. Well, speaking of rotten institutions, I'm wondering what drove you to write that article about the grand treaties beyond the tactical facts of what's happening in Ukraine with Russia and the United States and NATO's interplay with that, what's happening with China and Taiwan, and what's happening between Russia and China, especially vis-a-vis their agreements on defense, energy, trade, and nuclear forces, especially. So, why did you focus on the fact that these grand treaties really are on the decline, if not completely useless altogether? Maybe even the space treaty, which has been around a long time, may actually have to go by the wayside.
Well, So treaties may have a role and a purpose. So just to be clear, I wasn't questioning treaties, period. Now, in your intro, the person was, the pearl clutchers described as Biden allowed an extension of the New START treaty, which was the strategic arms treaty between Russia and America. China was no part of this. That's not history. Let me rephrase. As soon as Biden took office, he immediately said, "We'll unilaterally, we'll just accept an extension of the New START treaty." So it was hardly allowed. The Biden team loves treaties, but treaties only work if they are done, if there is a mechanism to enforce them, a strong, clear mechanism to enforce and punish a lack of conformance to a treaty. And there is clear resolve and credible deterrence. So those are two factors, both a penalty mechanism, and there has to be clear deterrence capabilities. Neither of those exist nowadays. The blue team loves treaties, but it's in the article I brought up, the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928 to outlaw war. Well, we all know how well that worked out in 1932 in Asia. World War II kicked off. And we said, "Oh, what are you talking about?" Well, that was Japan invading Manchuria, which you could say that was the opening phase of World War II. So Kellogg-Briand Pact, it was totally aspirational, no ability to enforce. And then the 1921 Washington naval treaties, which limited tonnage of because we didn't want an arms race in capital ships. Again, no penalty for lack of following or abiding by the treaties, and no clear deterrence. So what happened? Britain, which had the most incredible navy in the world, immediately chopped up its capital ships and melted them down and said, "Woohoo, hey, we're done. We don't have to worry about this anymore." And so did the Americans and the French, but the British especially, and the Americans abode by the treaty, which was all about weight limitations on different classes of ships. Whereas in hindsight, the Germans and the Japanese had their fingers underneath the scale. It was shown that like the Bismarck class, they clearly were exceeding their tonnage, but again, there was no mechanism to enforce or punish, and there was no deterrence. So they learned, the Germans and the Japanese learned real quick, this was not a serious treaty. So treaties do have a role and a place, but they must be enforceable and be punished. There must be punishment for not following. And then the second is there has to be credible deterrence. And neither of those exist nowadays. And there's still the space treaty that's supposedly in effect. There's the biological warfare treaty that's supposedly in effect. There's the Antarctic treaty that's supposedly in effect. And China, which is a signatory to two of those, to all three of those, is clearly blowing it off.
That's right. Well, we've got a hand up over in the live audience, John. Before we go to the break, let's take the question. And if we have time to answer, we will, but we'll definitely get it on the backside. Go ahead, Sofa King.
Hi, Colonel. Can you articulate your rationale for calling them the blue team? Is it just simply because they're Democrat, or when Colonel Maness first mentioned it, it was in the context of foreign policy, and it brought into my head, during military exercises, you have a red team and a blue team, and the blue team is always attacked. And I thought maybe that was what you were getting at, but then you have mentioned blue team again in a couple other contexts.
No, good question and good clarification. Thank you very much. Couch surfer, or what? Thank you. When I said blue team, it was a political term for Democrats. And there used to be Democrats that were hawks. I grew up in Washington State. Scoop Jackson, a Democrat, but an ultra mega hawk. There was nobody hawkier than Scoop Jackson. Now, he also was big on social programs, but when it came to defense, there was nobody hawkier than Scoop Jackson. But the blue team, they love, because being on a treaty team is the creme de la creme of a national security bureaucrat. Because a lot of times you get to hang out in Vienna, Austria, not at the embassy, but there's a special building there, or floors of a building shared by State Department and Department of Defense and other agencies. And you get to meet with foreign partners, and you get to eat fine food on the people's dime, and you get to talk in fake British accents, in lofty abstract terms, with absolutely no accountability for actually delivering anything. It's a great gig, and they just will.
It
they
is.
will
I meant, John, I meant just before we go to the break here, I definitely meant the leftist blue team in the State Department, because they have a bent towards that direction in the State Department historically, when I was talking about it. But I think we're talking about the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you're on the national security side or the foreign policy side. There's a big blue team out there that's idealistic instead of realistic when it comes to foreign policy and national security. We'll be right back with retired U.S. Army Colonel and former DOD official John Mills here on the Rob Maness Show live on Patriot.tv.
Experts say that Russian hackers found a way to hack our utilities, and the hackers may still be in there waiting to strike.
Go after their power, go after their water, and you can bring a nation to its knees.
They're identifying targets, they're positioning malware so they could pull the trigger when they wanted to.
Experts see the intrusion as a possible precursor to an unprecedented Russian cyber attack that could, in the event of war, devastate the U.S.
We know that China has been hacking everything they can and stealing our intellectual property. They want to take down America's economy. They want to take down our morale. They understand that if they can destroy our economy, they can destroy our future. We're at war.
Sounds rolling, all three cameras, we're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Really brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned the West of a risk of nuclear war if Western countries escalate the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. In his annual address, Putin warned the West of tragic consequences if the West sends its military contingents to Ukraine. Now, doubling down on these comments, the Russian president said Moscow has weapons to strike targets in the West.
They're talking about the possibility of sending NATO military contingents to Ukraine. But we remember the fate of those who once sent their contingents to our country. But now the consequences for possible interventionists will be much more tragic. We also have weapons. They know about this. As I just said, we also have a weapon that can hit targets on their territory. And they should understand that what they are doing now, trying to scare the whole world, it does risk a conflict with nuclear weapons, which means the destruction of civilization. Don't they understand this or what?
Now, Putin has also announced that the deployment of advanced weapon systems, including hypersonic missiles, and that it holds military advantages in Ukraine.
The hypersonic complex Kinzhal is not only in service, but is also being used with high efficiency to hit especially important targets during a special military operation. The Zircon, sea-based hypersonic missiles, have also been used in battle. These missiles were not even mentioned in my 2018 address, but this system is already deployed.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, live here on Patriot.tv. It's More War Mondays, and we're talking with Rob Maness Show contributor, really, John Mills, retired U.S. Army colonel and former senior DOD official, about grand treaties and the current state of affairs. And I picked that clip, John, because it kind of highlights some things that I wanted to talk about. One is, we mentioned the New START treaty that Biden just kind of automatically extended its renewal and everything. And what I'm curious about is that with what's happening with the Ukraine and NATO and the United States, Russia keeps threatening, kind of in a direct way, really, nuclear war. If the wrong red line is crossed, is that treaty causing more harm than good, because deterrence really doesn't really exist and there's no enforcement mechanism for it anymore?
Well, so on the New START treaty, which is our strategic treaty, and that's the 1550 warhead treaty. Everybody, there's just one number everybody needs to remember. That's 1,550 warheads. Russia has essentially put that one on pause. They're not going to comply with it. They're not canceling it, is the wordsmanship from Putin. But I think if Biden wants to be taken seriously by anybody on this topic, he needs to rapidly rebuild our strategic force, which we have a new bomber, we have a new ballistic missile submarine, we have a new ground-based missile, but they're all going to use old warheads, and they're all falling behind schedule, especially the Sentinel, the ground-based deterrent, and the Columbia class, which is caught in the calculus of how the throughput of submarines through 2 yards, Electric Boat and Newport News, and they're nowhere close to meeting what they're supposed to be doing. So again, when we need to start ramping up pit production, which are the core of new nuclear warheads, we're refurbishing and carefully handling stuff from 1992 and earlier. Our technical people are good, but they're literally scrambling for the hard copy blueprints in a lot of ways, because a lot of this stuff is in storage and is archives as we attempt to recapitalize. And we've lost a couple of generations of knowledge base as people have retired and passed on. So this is very scary. So if Biden wants to be taken seriously by anybody, including the Russians, he needs to rebuild deterrence. This is Reagan and Trump 101 here. You must deal from a position of strength on these treaties. And what I'm also offended by on the treaty is it displays the absolute ignorance of the intelligence community, not just willful ignorance to even acknowledge there's a Chinese nuclear threat, which at this point in time, I would say, even from a modicum of public sources, you have to presume China has at least 1,550 strategic nuclear warheads also, and probably far more delivery devices. Remember, the treaty is broken into warheads and delivery devices. Warheads, delivery devices. A delivery device is a bomber. It's a missile. It's a submarine. And the intelligence community has just totally ignored the Chinese nuclear threat until the last 18 months. And then they're going, whoa, they're having a building frenzy. Well, a failure of the IC, a failure of the national security apparatus. Now, I'm not a Putin fan in any way, shape, or form. And when it comes to Ukraine, I'm absolutely agnostic. Just enough resources to Ukraine to make it a fair fight. and a number of caveats beyond that. A dedicated inspector general, secure the southern border, release the J6ers, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, the treaties, this is extremely dangerous what's going on. And the Biden team, again, treaties have a role and a purpose, but you have to deal from a position of strength. And the blue team, meaning the Democrats in this context, the current Democrats, they just are falling over themselves to not even get the other. They'll say, we'll just follow the treaty even if you don't sign. That is a recipe for nuclear blackmail.
That's exactly right. We're setting ourselves up for nuclear blackmail, and I'm concerned on the Ukraine issue that it's driven Russia and China closer together. Our decisions have at a time when we are weakening ourselves by numbers. Numbers of weapons. Because we're overdoing what we ought to be. What we want to do in Ukraine to the extent where our depleted reserves are depleted even more. And then you literally just said that we have to assume the Chinese have 1,550 nuclear warheads at the strategic level, and the same, the needed number of delivery vehicles. If you combine those two forces, I mean, the United States and allied nuclear deterrent is at zero, basically. Because
well, you have to consider the combined Russian Chinese nuclear force is twice the size of America. And the only other nuclear power officially on our team is the UK, which has a small number of warheads, which is only for their Trident submarines. They only got 4 Trident boats. And now we're returning the B-61 free fall device, but that's not a strategic weapon. That's a tactical or theater weapon. And the French have a ground-based force. They no longer have the bombers, and I don't think they just have the ground-based missiles. I take that back. They have the ground-based missiles. They don't have the bombers, and they have 4 in force to FRAP. They have 4 boomer submarines. But you never know which day of the week whose side they're on. So it's a very precarious situation. Jan Stoltenberg, the NATO secretary, needs to have his ears boxed. I mean, I was shown a speech of his, and it just was absolutely over the top deranged about Ukraine will join NATO. It's like, hold on a second here. I don't think that's a policy position that's above the head of the NATO Secretary General. I don't think NATO Secretary General should be espousing a position that's dangerous. And even the Biden team has actually, in a number of statements, been very, very. I don't think they've said they want Ukraine. We don't like the Biden team on a number of accounts, but I don't think they've said they insist on Ukraine joining NATO, unless I missed something. So very dangerous comment from Stoltenberg, absolutely egregious, over the top, unnecessary. And then we wonder why we have tension with Russia. So I'm not a Russia fanboy in any way, but that was absolutely uncalled for what Stoltenberg did. And, he needs to have his ears boxed on that one. Dangerous.
Yeah, it's I spoke about it last week on a couple of interviews that I was asked to do. It's beyond dangerous. It sets the stage for Putin to use rational decision making, what he says is rational decision making, to oppose a potential threat in the nuclear realm. And if we're looking at wanting to deter and keep that from happening, those are the exact wrong things to do. It's like U.S. senators here talking about, well, we have nuclear weapons. One of my own senators said that a while back, out in the open, and removing ambiguity from the equation of deterrence. That sets that stage and increases the risk of a nuclear weapon exchange rather than decreasing it like a normal threat of military force would do. It seems as though, John, we've lost our ability to think at the strategic level when it comes to deterrence and these types of treaties. And after this break, we're gonna go into the other big threat, the real big threat, which is the Chinese Communist Party, and get an update on what they're going to do with Taiwan and where we think they're going now, as things have changed a couple of times over the years since we started talking about this on this show. I'm Rob Maness with retired U.S. Army Colonel John Mills. It's More War Mondays here on the show at Patriot.tv Live. We'll be right back.
Hi neighbor, Pat Boone here. Today, I want to help you find some peace of mind concerning your money. Like it or not, we're all living in a financial war zone. That's right. We're watching our hard-earned dollars get crushed by inflation. In fact, recently inflation reached its highest level in 40 years. And on top of that, cash, which has always represented freedom and privacy, is more and more being replaced by a cashless system. That's right. Powerful forces are definitely waging a war against cash. So I'm encouraging you to prepare before it's too late. Call or text the number on the screen for a free report, The Secret War on Cash from Swiss America. Discover how a few simple steps can protect your money as well as your privacy and your peace of mind. So call or text for your free report, The Secret War on Cash, and make sure to mention Pat Boone sent you.
Joining me at the news desk now is Rebecca Walzer of WalzerWealth.com. She has been a regular guest on my TV show, Brennan House Live, for a long time. She's not just an economics expert, but she's an attorney. Rebecca, you have a large firm. How many people work for your firm?
Just about 30, yes.
30. And
yes.
Tell me, how can people prepare for what's coming with the end of the dollar as we know it?
The end of the fiat system as we know it globally. We are moving to hard asset-backed currencies again. Thank the Lord, because fiat is where we get into all the problems. When you have debt-based currency, you have debt-based problems. And the United States, unfortunately, since 2020 has not stopped spending at pandemic levels. This is systemic, and it is unsustainable, and it is coming to an end, especially with the addition of Saudi Arabia and the UAE to the BRICS nations. This is what controls our petrodollar. This is the threat immediately in 2024.
For more information, WalzerWealth.com. WalzerWealth.com. She is not your traditional financial planner. Find out why at WalzerWealth.com.
President Biden has described as talks in San Francisco with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping as their most constructive and productive discussions yet. Mr. Biden said they agreed to resume high-level military-to-military communications, and he said clear and direct contact was necessary to avoid accidents or misunderstandings. Earlier, Mr. Xi described China's relationship with the US as the most important in the world. President Biden made his comments at a news conference that Mr. Xi didn't attend.
I welcome the positive steps we've taken today, and it's important for the world to see that we're implementing the approach in the best traditions of American diplomacy. We're talking to our competitors and the key, and just talking, just being blunt with one another, so there's no misunderstanding, as a key element to maintaining global stability and delivering for the American people.
Live on Patriot.tv and our X Spaces simulcast, and we're talking grand treaties and the current situation. First with Russia, now we're going to spend this half of the show talking about China and its intentions towards Taiwan, its mix of nuclear and conventional forces, its hypersonic missile capability, whether it will fall under any future grand treaty, such as the one that we withdrew from, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, not too long ago, because Russia consistently cheated on it, quite frankly, and those kind of things, with Colonel John Mills, retired U.S. Army, former senior DOD cyber operations official. And John, that little clip there, I just wanted to put out there because there was this one positive thing, because I see military-to-military communications channels remaining open as a positive step towards reestablishing deterrence, now that it's failed all around the world in a conventional sense and is on the cusp of failing from a nuclear perspective too. That's the one thing out of that meeting I think that was a positive. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we should we have the Mo link in the Pentagon, in the National Military Command Center. That's an immediate line to Moscow. We have an equivalent to Beijing. We should always have something like that. I know I'm not rejecting something like that, but again, those really the other side only respects us when we have an ability to enforce or punish, and that uses all instruments of national power. That's another problem. The blue team, the Democrats, although they self-declare themselves the smartest people in the room and the adults in the room, if that's the case, why there's many instruments of national power: dime fill, diplomatic, information, military, economic, finance, intelligence, law enforcement. So right there, you got seven elements of national power, instruments of national power. But the blue team always goes, even though they're the smartest, according to them, they always go back to the military instrument of national power as the first choice. That is wrong. That is wrong. Trump and Navarro knew military should be the last option. It's always economics, it's always finance, economics and finance. But the blue team just is incapable of you using this, and they'll lecture people endlessly on dime fill. Yet it's always the military instrument. It's just much easier to put a JDAMs on target. It makes good film. It looks like you're doing something, but I mean, I think part of the problem is they're economically illiterate. They've never run, they've never been, they've always been in the policy world and think tanks. They've never actually had to run anything. And to them, it's just, Harvard Belfer Center lecture. The only thing they know how to do is this thing called Title 10 DOD. You just call them on the phone from the White House and they can do something. All the other departments and agencies, it takes, they do something, but there's no visible manifestation of them doing something. Well, but strangulation through economics and finance is the most powerful.
It sure is. Unfortunately, us military types, most of us focus on the Title 10 side of it. So we work extra hard to study up on what it means to run corporations and businesses, and kind of rely on folks in the other branches of the government to help us as experts in that regard. And it's just sad because they're just bureaucrats. They haven't really done those kind of things. You're not going to find an Elon Musk level of knowledge of business anywhere in the United States government. Well, John, we've got some hands up over in the Spaces audience. Let's take one of those, and then I want to jump into your briefing you gave at CPAC and show the audience some of these charts that you brought up to help explain the picture. AJ, go ahead over in Spaces.
Colonel Maness, thank you for the mic. Colonel Mills, it's great to see you again, sir. I hold this particular opinion that doesn't really win me any friends, but it goes as such that no treaty has ever been signed by any two powers that both powers didn't already have the contingencies in place to render the effects of that treaty meaningless. Thus, they will never lose power. They will never lose face. But it's just a extended great photo op. Let's have another slice of pie, another cup of coffee, and we'll get back to work as soon as possible. So there's only one treaty that's never been on paper, and no one has ever signed it. But everyone takes it seriously as it's real as the air that we breathe, and that's the peace through strength. That treaty of mutually assured destruction, and everybody seems to take that seriously. That's my opinion. What are your thoughts on that, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. Now, good points. Well, again, I outlined two components of a successful treaty: an ability to punish for non-compliance, and then second is credible deterrence. And so that's where, even Reagan would sign them. And but the Russians respected us. They respected us. Now, you say both parties never intended to follow a treaty. I can assure you, and Rob also has experience of this, when we sign a treaty, we carry it out, and we don't have secret plans to evade the treaty. And I've been in the room with informal government functions and meetings with the other side, including Russian FSB officers, where topics like this will come up, and they go, "Oh, we know you're pulling our leg. We know you have something hidden." And no, we don't. We're actually following the treaty, and we do. But I think that's dangerous when we follow the treaty and we have let our defenses lapse, or there is an administration with no intent to actually inflict damages and punishment for failing to follow. So I just, the era of treaties is over, because there used to be a day when Democrats and Republicans actually believed in America and defending America, and that's not true anymore. And only the mega audience really is serious about that.
Yeah, I agree, John. I mean, if we can bring up the world is on fire, Middle East and Europe graphic, Mr. Producer, just to start showing the audience exactly how badly things are going in the world. I mean, this is your numbers go from 1 through 6 just on Europe and the Middle East when it comes to these military operations and threats to peace that not just the United States, but NATO, Russia, Iran, Israel, all of Iran's militias. As a matter of fact, I got some breaking news a minute ago that 3 undersea cables have been cut in the Red Sea. That's all I have on it. I don't know if it's an allied effort or if it's something to do with the Houthis that had just sunk a UK cargo ship just yesterday, quite frankly. So the world is on fire. I think you aptly named this chart from your speech at CPAC just a week ago, John. And then bring up world is on fire in the Pacific and Western Hemisphere to show the picture of that one. I mean, look at that. You've got the Venezuela, Guyana thing, Panama, the Cuba issue, we just said Venezuela, the cartels in China from Mexico, China within the United States. We've got what we think is over 100,000 military-age males that have illegally entered the country into the United States itself, too. So even these slides titled "The World is on Fire" are a little bit out of date, John. Is there anything else new to add to these since you gave this talk at CPAC?
Well, there's another slide that showed the Pacific, and we have, at least 4 regional conflicts or about to be shooting wars just in the Pacific. But every one of these traces to China.
Let's bring that up, the current situation in the Pacific while John's talking about.
So all these trace back to China. I mean, even so here's, and this one doesn't have the bubbles on it, but North Korea nuclear saber rattling towards South Korea and Japan. Extremely dangerous. And yes, North Korea definitely has nuclear weapons. Crude, unreliable means to deliver them. But that still shouldn't be dismissed. In the center there, you have this is a World War II map I marked up. That's Formosa, but that's Taiwan. Formosa and Taiwan are the same thing. Chinese aggression toward Formosa, and in the south in the Philippines, a very dangerous situation. Maybe even a more possible shooting war with the Philippines as the Chinese are shoving aggressively against the Filipinos, who are standing their ground and doing a great job, but they just don't have the resources. But we have 4 new base camps, at least 4, maybe even more. Oh, and by the way, we do now have officially 3 base camps on Taiwan. That's official. And then down off of the map is Singapore, which has a huge defense spend. In the end, is on our side. But in case of any conflict, you could expect China to make a move to seize Singapore, because that would secure their passage through the Straits of Malacca, which is 50% of their energy coming from Iran. So every one of these traces and is directed by China. Even the Ukraine. Everybody says the Azov Brigade, corruption, WEF, blah 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 blah. Whatever. It's China. That was Putin says, I will deliver you the Ukraine in 72 hours. That's China. So it's all China, and the world's on fire. You know, we even have the Biden team. Well, why aren't they tougher on China? Well, I mean, I think at this point in time, it's not unreasonable. It's not hyperbolic to clearly Biden has not moved on fentanyl because he's afraid that's going to affect payments to his family. I mean, come on, at this point in time, that it's been shown, and Schweitzer's book has shown there is a cash flow from China to the Biden family, and so yeah, we got a corrupt person in office who's being swayed by being paid off. Well, it's sure looking like it.
Well, yeah, that's why it looks like they're moving on Taiwan in some way. And when we come back from the break, we'll throw the assessment matrix up that you presented, and talk. You know, we'll talk through that. What do we think China is really doing? Are they going to go all out for a full-up kinetic invasion, or are they going to do something else, or some combination of soft and hard to try to get Taiwan back under their control, and at the same time stave off the United States and its allies? I'm Rob Maness on More War Mondays here on Patriot.tv Live. We'll be right back.
We've learned through the pandemic we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down, and doctors' offices were shut down, and even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
The markets are getting crazy, and now is the time to protect yourself from economic turmoil. Silver is in the headlines right now and creating lots of excitement as the price of silver is extremely attractive compared to gold. A call to Swiss America gets you the scoop on whether the silver opportunity is for real. What you'll discover will really blow your mind. Today, silver faces a huge shortage due to the rising demand by military, solar, electric cars, and computers, all of which depend on silver. But right now, silver is priced to sell according to worldwide experts. Now, to help you get started, Swiss America is offering beautiful United States Walking Liberty half dollars, issued by the U.S. Mint from 1916 to 1947 and minted in 90% pure silver for a special introductory price. Limit of $250 per customer while supplies last. So call the number on your screen or visit SwissAmerica.com, because now is the time to rediscover silver.
Tensions rise in the Taiwan Strait as Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reports a significant escalation in Chinese military activities. In the past 24 hours, Taiwan has detected 19 Chinese military aircraft and 7 naval vessels in its vicinity. Alarming reports revealed that out of the 19 People's Liberation Army aircraft, a staggering 12 crossed the Taiwan Strait median line. In response, Taiwan swiftly deployed aircraft, naval ships, and air defense missile systems to monitor and track the movements of the People's Liberation Army. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense issued a statement confirming the situation. It said 19 PLA aircraft, and 7 PLAN vessels operating around Taiwan were detected, with 12 of the aircraft crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait and entering Taiwan's north, southwestern and eastern eddies. ROC armed forces have taken immediate action to monitor the situation. This marks the latest in a series of provocations, as Taiwan has already reported 253 instances of Chinese military aircraft and 150 naval ship detections in February alone. Experts believe that China's increased use of grey zone tactics, defined as efforts to achieve security objectives without restoring to direct and sizable use of force, has escalated tensions in the region. The concerns are further highlighted by Admiral Samuel Paparo, the US nominee to lead US Indo-Pacific Command. Speaking at a conference in Silicon Valley, Admiral Paparo warned that China might soon possess the capability to use military exercises as a cover for a potential invasion of Taiwan. Admiral Paparo stated, and I quote, "Despite economic and demographic challenges, China is undaunted in its ambitions, which include not only the world, the West Pacific and the South China Sea, but more acutely, Taiwan." He emphasized that People's Liberation Army has undergone significant changes in force levels and joint capabilities, posing a heightened threat. The Admiral expressed concerns about the erosion of strategic warning signs, stating that it could hinder the US military's ability to support allies and partners and respond effectively in case China decides to use force. The situation in the Taiwan Strait remains tense, and the international community is closely monitoring developments as the geopolitical landscape in the region continues to evolve.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Patriot.tv Live. And that clip, ladies and gentlemen, was just 2 days ago. And we've seen a whole series of these kind of maneuvers in various ways really building up over the last year. And we're talking with our guest, retired U.S. Army Colonel John Mills, a former senior DOD official, and who, by the way, gave this update at CPAC just a week ago or so. And a little bit longer than that, was on the ground in Taiwan for the elections and doing some other things over there. Well, John, that doesn't surprise you and I. We've been watching this and observing this for quite some time. But I think you've got some analysis now, having done these observations from open source intelligence, where you think they might be headed. And that's why I wanted to bring up the decision matrix assessment that you presented not too long ago. If you could go ahead and bring that up while John addresses that.
Of kind of evaluating an opponent's possible courses of action. The columns across the top are courses of action by China toward Taiwan and the world. The rows are different factors. So there's a scoring system from -2 all the way up to +2. Now, before CPAC, it was kind of trending, and this was just a theoretical review. I mean, you could debate each one of these factors, exact meanings and definitions in great detail. But it was kind of looking like envelop, which is kind of a blockade, seemed to be trending that way, or bypass, going for the Philippines, going for the Solomon Islands, and that would lead toward a firm envelopment of Taiwan. But I think some of the concern now is Taiwan has two forward counties, Kinmen County, Kinmen, and then Matsu County. Now, and Kinmen is literally 4,000 feet away from China. Okay, that's what separates China from Kinmen. Up north, it's about 6 miles off the coast is the Matsu Island grouping. I think Matsu is a more complicated problem set for China to invade. Kinmen is clearly the easiest invasion. They could fall down and essentially be on Kinmen from a starting point on their beaches. Now, in 1949, China did attempt to invade Kinmen. It was a total slaughter. They lost, and they remember that. But I think also China has unilaterally changed the air traffic control procedures in their southbound corridor that flies along the separation line between China and Taiwan, Taiwan proper, the big island of Taiwan, not the forward counties. Matsu and Kinmen are right up against. They're on the other side of the line of separation. You got to look at Kinmen almost like West Berlin in the Cold War. It's been separated. It is West Berlin, and we have to make sure West Berlin doesn't fall, just like the Cold War. I'm concerned with the air traffic control procedure changes on M503, the southbound route. There's 2 hard right turns for a southbound aircraft, both west. I can't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but one of them goes right, essentially skirts right over the top of Kinmen. And as you know from your aviation days, so Rob, that an aircraft coming south does that hard right turn as if it's going to an airport just in China, but just 4,000 feet away from Kinmen. And as soon as they're executing the turn, they declare an in-flight emergency and say, we have to land at Kinmen immediately, and under the international protocol, you're supposed to allow them to land. And, out pops 200 special operators. And then you have aircraft 2, 3, and 4 that also has 200 special operators on it, flying in right behind and also declaring in-flight emergencies. And that could be a method to overwhelm, and then coordinated with that, they could have fast boats come across to attempt a beach landing. But this is scary stuff. And I think Kinmen is looking like the likely opportunity for China to strip away something she can declare victory or partial victory, but he can hold up a propaganda coup internally, because remember, his audience is internal, and anybody gunning to take him over can, it'll quiet them, because he says, hey, I delivered part of Taiwan. And I think the international community and most Americans, and they go, well, that's just a forward island of Taiwan. They didn't take Taiwan, actually. They took just a little forward island. Well, that's like taking a major county in America and taking it away from America and now saying that's part of China. No, it's still important. It's still relevant. But most people are going to be, there's so much confusion right now on propaganda. People are going to be, come on, it's just an irrelevant forward island. We're going to go to war over that. Well, yeah, actually, it is U.S. law and policy. Yeah. So it's coercion.
Yeah,
So very concerning.
Which is quite different than what the Russians did in Crimea. Actually, not what they did, but how the U.S. responded was because we had not declared Crimea or the Ukraine as a vital national interest for decades, and still haven't really, quite honestly, in our formal national security decision-making process. So our response to something like a Kinmen Island take, which sounds eerily familiar to the Crimea invasion by the Russian Special Operations Forces when they took that territory, would have to be a reasonable response expected by the United States that would be dramatically different than how we responded over the Crimea issue, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, and Kinmen is the administration. We now have announced 3 bases on Taiwan. One of them is on Kinmen, and so it's a special operations base camp. We don't know how big, how large, where it's at, and we don't need to know those details. So, but there's also one on Penghu, which is an island county right off of the big island of Taiwan, and then there's one on the main island of Taiwan. So we now have U.S. soldiers, U.S. military skin in the game on Kinmen. So if they try to move on Kinmen, we have American forces officially there. And so I think this is important. We're saying, hey, this is Kinmen is important, Taiwan is important, but the administration still is confused and speaks out of both sides of its mouth, and especially you still got the payoffs going to Joe. This is the China. That's not ambiguity. The Chinese are furious because it's like, we're paying you, you're not doing what we want you to do, and we're paying you.
Exactly right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on today and explaining all this, because the American people need to have a firm accurate picture of what's happening and then see the differences in how the United States is supposed to act when they have a vital national interest at stake versus how we've been acting from a position of weakness. In a lot of ways, it's caused the world to be on fire. We appreciate you, and that's it for today, folks, on Rob Maness Show, Patriot.tv Live, More War Mondays. Tomorrow's Training Tuesday. A lot of nuclear stuff going on. We've got the expert that's living today in the United States coming on to talk about electromagnetic pulses, threats to the nuclear command and control and communication system that we talked about a little bit last week, but we're going to go in depth on this threat this week just to show you why it's important that we continue to maintain our deterrent forces, and where they're weak, we make them strong enough again so that the peace is kept instead of all-out war. I'm Rob Maness on Patriot.tv Live. I'll see you tomorrow.